so that I can put insert my sleeve into the shirt. Now I'm going to do this with the flat method. So that means that I leave my sleeve flat and I go ahead and stitch the Armscye seam. Then when I'm finished doing that, then I'll come back and stitch the sleeve seam and go all the way down the side seam of the shirt, all in one seam. Now that's called flat method or flat insertion for your sleeve. And the reason I can do that on this men's shirt is because it's got a very low sleeve cap. See, here's my bicep line. Look how low that sleeve cap is. And that's because the shirt hangs, the seam, this Armscye seam of the shirt hangs down onto the arm a little bit of the person wearing it. It's not like a set-in sleeve that has a really sloped high sleeve cap because it fits really snugly along the joint where, or the line basically where your arm joins your body. This one is loose because it's a little bit looser under the arm and it's a little bit lower on the shoulder, off the shoulder seam. So the first thing I'm going to do is E-stitch. Okay, and I'm going to E-stitch between my notches. Now when we E-stitch, I'm going to turn this up to 3 millimeters so I get a bigger stitch. I like to E-stitch at 3 millimeters and baste at 4 millimeters. That's just a good rule of thumb for an average weight fabric. So I'm going to E-stitch from notch to notch so that when I put my sleeve in, it will help to it will help me to put this outward curve into the inward curve from the sleeve into the garment. Now if you E-stitch right on 5/8, which is exactly where you need the E-stitching, sometimes it might show on the right side of the garment, then you have to take it out. So I like to do a thread's width away into my seam allowance. So it still E-stitches it right next to the 5/8, but it usually does not show on the right side of the garment. But that's hard to do a thread's width away. So what I do is I line up my shirt to 5/8, then I take my needle and I move it 1 notch towards the raw edge. And then now I know I can go ahead and use the guideline for 5/8, knowing that I'm about a thread's width away into that raw edge. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is E-stitch right along the edge of the Armscye between the notches. Okay, all right, I got that. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do to prepare my sleeve is I'm now going to do some basting. So I'm going to now go up to 4 millimeters. Okay, so I'm on the 4 millimeter stitch, and now what I'm going to do is I am going to stitch along this entire edge, not just between the notches, but along the entire edge of the Armscye at a scant 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so a scant, that means a little bit less. So if you look here at your machine, you've got your markings like 5/8, 1/2 inch, 3/8, and then the next bit, but then your feed dog is in the way, but that next little line here is actually 1/4 or 2/8. So we have 5/8, 4/8, 3/8, 2/8. So if I take my fabric and I go in there, now I've also got my needle with one click or whatever in towards the raw edge, so it's just barely inside. So again, if I line this up to my 1/4 of an inch and I keep that needle just barely inside, then that will give me a nice scant. Okay, so I think I'll do that. All right, so now the other thing is from the needle to the very edge of the foot, that also is a 1/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna look at that, but it's just barely more than a 1/4. So if you like to line up your needle to the edge of your foot to get a 1/4, then you're gonna have to go 2 You're gonna have to go in twice. Okay, we gotta move our needle up. So you have to go in, oh, it did. Yeah, then you have to move your needle in twice. And, okay, now I'm gonna take, I don't wanna get this gummed up, so I gotta take it out and start over. So if I do that, if I moved it twice, and then I put my needle down, let's get that right there. Then when I put my foot down, now I am a foot away. I'm sorry, I'm a 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of that foot. So what I've done is I've moved my needle over twice. So sometimes that's a little easier to gauge your sewing, your edge by, than this little tiny kind of mark right in there. So I'm gonna go ahead with that mark, and that looks good to me. That's a nice scant. And see, now I can keep this right on that edge. See, knowing that I'm a scant of a 1/4 inch. Yep, yeah, so, but you want to keep it right on that edge. Otherwise, because if it goes beyond that, then it's going to be too wide. And it's important to be accurate here. Okay. The other thing that I could do is keep it right on the edge of this, the opening part of the foot. And sometimes that's even a little easier because it's a little easier to see and line up your fabric too. So anyway, there's a few little tricks you can do, but what you want to do is be a scant 1/4 of an inch. Okay, I'm going to move some threads here. Okay, there we go. Now, because we're basting, we're going to end up pulling up that basting, so make sure you leave your thread tails, okay, on the basting and on the E-stitching. Okay, so now I've got those 2 rows in. I'm ready to pin my sleeve to the garment.